Hi, my name is Laura Mesra, and I'm part of Group 1. Today, our group will focus on the morality and ethical impacts of implanting Neuralink brain chips in children. So, for patients living today with epilepsy, paralysis, and neuromuscular conditions, brain-computer interfaces can help to restore movement and allow them to communicate with the outside world. However, our thesis is that it's not ethical or morally correct to allow Neuralink brain chips to be implanted in children, and this is due to autonomy concerns and lack of control over individual thoughts, as well as privacy invasion concerns, the digital divide, and the risk of physical harm from those implant surgeries. Neuralink brain chips are brain-computer interfaces that allow people to control devices with their own thoughts. The technology capitalizes on electrodes and neurotransmitters, and it's used to restore mobility, treat neurological conditions, and to improve communication for nonverbal individuals. So, due to the latest innovations of BCIs, the balance between modern medical advancements and the need for comprehensive security measures is truly crucial. So next, Mike will be covering the autonomy concern section.
Can a task in the physical world, completed with the assistance of Neuralink, really be considered an autonomous human action? The Kantian ethicists would say no. According to Kant, individual autonomy is dependent on a person's ability to self-determine. Neuralink records and decodes signals from individual neurons and transmits them back to the brain through electronic stimulation, enabling users to control connected devices. This decoder is now an agent of decision-making between thought and action. We cannot truly know if Neuralink's interpretation of a person's thoughts and the resulting output is what the user was intending to happen every time. This could lead to the illusion of agency, a concept closely related to confirmation bias. Neuralink might work too well, enhancing the capabilities of users far beyond what they would be expected to be. If they believe they are solely responsible for the events that they are not, the device is now the agent, and the user is unaware they are no longer in control. Their personal autonomy is relinquished, at least from an ethical perspective.
Hi, my name is Eve, and when diving into factors that increase risk of lost autonomy, our team is curious on if Neuralink makes the bulk of the decisions over the user. In studies found on BCIs, subconscious thoughts have been observed triggering neurons to activate. With a direct brain-to-muscle connection or brain-to-robot assisted technology connection, a subconscious thought would cause an action to occur. We all have thoughts that do not result in action, and for example, if a person were to get angry, they tend to restrain themselves from acting out, but with a direct connection from a spark in a neuron to the outside world with a BCI, there is nothing stopping anything harmful or embarrassing from being carried out. Those are some examples of the risk of loss of autonomy, and next I'll be passing it over to Laura presenting the next topic.
So there is a very high risk that learning could be interfered with if Neuralink brain chips were inserted in children. Children have a much higher neuroplasticity than adults, and this means that their brains are growing and forming new pathways for thought. So the existing use case for Neuralink don't translate well to a child's brain because they were designed for more restorative purposes like restoring eyesight or speech or fine motor skills. So this is similar to deep brain stimulation because Neuralink scientists would be attempting to rewire an individual's thought patterns through electrical stimulation. So this would also be similar to shock therapy on a more nanotech scale. And this can be very dangerous because Neuralink and other BCIs have very high risk of triggering epilepsy, which is an increased danger, especially for children. So next, Mike will be covering the physiological aspects of BCIs.
The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a cyborg as a bionic human, and Encyclopedia Britannica expands that definition to a person whose body contains mechanical or electrical devices and whose abilities are greater than the abilities of normal humans. Many cyborgs are from the world of fantasy and movies, but Neuralink is a real device implanted in the brain to enhance abilities, and it also has the capability to alter a person's personality for better or for worse. There is precedence for concern. Deep brain stimulation is a technique used to treat epilepsy using brain implants and electrical stimulation. In case studies by University of Tasmania professor Gilbert Friedman, he found that patients with these devices experienced radical personality changes. There were breakups, divorce in almost 65% of recipients, and in some cases, patients even committed suicide.
Privacy concerns with the Neuralink brain chips include issues relating to the collection of personal information, as brain interfaces could access private thoughts and emotions from people. In terms of how brain data is reviewed and assessed, the thoughts analyzed would then need to be transmitted to a separate device to be processed, and the collection of this information by any third party would result in an enormous breach of privacy. Data transferred from patients' brains could then be stored in the cloud and would need to be stored under the correct security regulations to ensure the safety of the patient data. Exposure on the information and privacy violations while obtaining and storing patient data is a huge privacy concern. When it comes to privacy in relation to children, the security concerns become a much higher risk due to the potential inability of minors to fully understand or consent in the collection and storage of their personal brain data. Next, Laura will be highlighting the security concerns surrounding Neuralink brain chips.
So BCIs could potentially not only read information, but also write information within the brain. And that information would then allow for the potential of new emotional changes within individuals, or specifically in our case, in our research, within children. So additional security and control related concerns for Neuralink brain chips and the potential implementation of these chips into children include the possibility of bad actors actually being able to hack into the brain chips, which would then obviously put patients at an enormous risk. So anti-hacking systems for brain chips will be extremely critical to ensure the safety of patients. And because of this, there are enormous privacy concerns around how brain data is assessed and accessed by Neuralink. So to regulate overall security and control of the Neuralink brain chips, one framework that is being analyzed by researchers today is the Risk Innovation Framework. This framework supports both responsible and ethical innovation and is thought to be the best approach to developments and research around BCIs. But because these protocols and these new measurements are still being developed today and are net new, it would not be safe at this point to implant Neuralink brain chips into the young brains of children. So next, Mike will be covering how brain data is reviewed and assessed.
There is concern that algorithms tasked with measuring complex concepts that could include human qualities might allow predatory entities to make decisions for very vulnerable groups of the population. Some negative and concerning data security related concerns include hypothetical scenarios of third-party companies purchasing neurodata from brain-computer interface companies and leveraging that to make decisions at scale. In addition, using this technology in developing brain chips for specific neuroenhancement could theoretically be made a requirement for employment with various industries, such as the military. Courts could look to demand that individuals who are at risk for committing crimes need to have brain chips implanted to monitor their behavior. All of these hypothetical scenarios highlight privacy and data security concerns and are reasons for why it is highly dangerous to allow Neuralink brain chips to be implanted into children's brains.
Neuralink must comply with HIPAA, which are regulations that are critical and mandatory for the security and privacy of all patient and healthcare-related information. HIPAA encompasses the security, confidentiality, and integrity mandates, ensuring that the implanted BCIs are accurate and the interaction between the patient's brain and device functionality is very critical. If the device is not working properly, the consequences could be fatal, which then leads us to discussing the actual surgical implementation, which Laura will discuss next.
This video actually shows a robot making insertions into a human brain to insert the actual Neuralink chip. The implanting procedure of Neuralink brain chips is conducted through Neuralink's clinical trials, through its robotic technology. So the surgical robots that are used for implantation consist of three main components: the base structure, the robot's head, and the insertion needle. So these electrodes record neuron activity and transmit the signals all over the body, which then enables the neural human functionality. And because of the complexity of this technology, the surgical process requires extreme precision to prevent any misalignments that could potentially compromise the patient's neurological health. And as you can see, this would be especially critical within children.
The legal considerations require Neuralink to have a patient's informed consent by establishing clear communication and transparency. For users to make fully informed decisions, they must be provided with a comprehensive understanding of the potential risks, benefits, and long-term implications. This includes knowledge about the surgical procedure and the potential physical harms associated with it, such as the bleeding, infections, device rejection, and malfunction. And patients must also be aware of the ethical dilemmas and uncertainties that come with such a small sample size of patients with Neuralink brain chips. Additionally, informed consent must be an ongoing process, and patients should have the opportunity to withdraw their consent at any time.
Benefits from a cognitive standpoint of the Neuralink devices could be widespread and could be emphasized in terms of wealth inequality issues, also known as the digital divide. So the sick individuals who can afford these types of devices and this technology would be at a hugely greater advantage opposed to those who cannot afford them. An additional bias here includes the potential lack of diversity in clinical trial patients and also control groups, and the lack of diversity in terms of the teams that actually design the algorithms that create the brain chip technology interfaces for Neuralink. So Kant's categorical imperatives are focused on moral obligations and reason, and moral law, according to Kant, is a requirement for everyone. So deontologists in Kant would view implanting brain chips in children as unethical as well as being immoral. And this is because in order to consider others and focus on the moral duty at hand and the obligation required to keep them safe, knowing the security and privacy as well as the physical harm-related issues with Neuralink, it would not be safe to implant them or any of these type of chips within children.
Utilitarianism views Neuralink brain chips in children immoral due to the significant risks that outweigh the potential benefits. Utilitarianism focuses on the consequences of actions rather than intentions, meaning that even if the goal is to enhance cognitive abilities to treat neurological disorders, the potential harm is considered and has the final say. The harmful complications at present are risk of bleeding, immune reduction, and irreversible neurological damage. With that said, subjecting children to experimental procedures with its harmful effects is immoral by the views of utilitarianism. Now I'll be passing it off to Mike with his ethical viewpoint.
The social intuitionist believes that our instincts guide our decision making. Those gut reactions we get as responses to stimuli are inherent in us through our conditioning almost since birth. We learn our behaviors and what is acceptable from the people around us. Society is not ready for the radical changes implanting Neuralink in children would bring because they are immediately turned off by the thought of the procedure itself. Furthermore, since the age of monsters like Frankenstein, we have been conditioned to have a negative view of humans merging with technology, and that is not going to change overnight. There are serious ethical issues surrounding Neuralink and BCIs in general with adults. Making the leap to using them on children is not advisable. Utilitarianism, deontology, and social intuitionism all agree with this assessment. Implanting BCI in children does not benefit society at large, and we would be ignoring our duty to protect the health of our young people if we allowed it to happen. In addition, society is not ready to accept such a radical step. Responsible, educated, informed citizens, such as policymakers, scientists, and doctors, must step in and address these concerns before any trials are discussed or desperate patients step forward to volunteer their children to be experimented on. A child does not have the same level of control over their decision making. Therefore, the responsibility for ethical decision making rests firmly on their shoulders. And now to Laura for our conclusion.
So in conclusion, Neuralink's brain chips should not be implanted into children due to autonomy concerns, the lack of control over individual thoughts after implanting, privacy concerns, and the risk of physical harms from the implant surgeries. As we discussed throughout this video, the concerns stemming from an ethical standpoint via constantology, utilitarianism, and social intuitionism show that inserting these BCIs into vulnerable young children would be unethical. And as we've discussed, taking into account the autonomy concerns, the privacy concerns, data security issues, and physical harms from the surgeries themselves, as well as the legal issues, these BCIs should not be implanted in children. Next, we'll show the references and the sources that we used to create this video. Thank you.